on the primacy of process, or why life does not begin logically. The following text is a dense, pointed, and at the same time reflective philosophical statement against the primacy of concept and logic in Western philosophy. It advocates for a mode of thinking that takes process, becoming, and openness seriously, and thereby exposes itself to the risk of the non-determined. It is intellectually demanding, but argues consistently and with philosophical coherence. And here we go.
In the history of Western philosophy, there is a deeply rooted notion that the world, if only described correctly, can be fully grasped in terms of concepts and logical propositions. This idea, often assumed without reflection, forms the foundation of numerous epistemological and metaphysical programs, from Plato's theory of ideas to Cartesian clarity and the modern formalisms of analytic philosophy. But this notion arises not from experience, but from desire. It is the desire for clarity, for certainty, for control. A metaphysical ideology. The idea that reality must be fully comprehensible as a logical structure. This perspective places the results of processes, concepts, judgments, statements at the beginning and treats them as primary. But this is where the error lies. For the results are not the origin, but the outcome of a living, irreversible temporal process, a process that eludes the grasp of classical logic. Whitehead perhaps formulated this more clearly than anyone else. In his Process and Reality, he describes the world not as a system of objects with properties, but as an ongoing becoming, a ceaseless emergence of events. The fallacy of misplaced concreteness, for him, lies in mistaking abstractions, such as numbers, concepts, or logical formulas for what is real. Heidegger, too, criticizes the forgetfulness of being as a consequence of logocentric thinking. By focusing only on what is present at hand, we lose sight of what makes this presence possible in the first place, enactment, the letting happen, being itself. Kierkegaard speaks of the system as a structure of thought in which the individual and their lived life have no place. And Nietzsche sees logic not as a description of nature, but as a morality of opposites. It serves not truth, but the stabilization of a particular worldview. What unites all these thinkers is the insight that the living process, the origin of the new, cannot be logically derived, cannot be fully articulated, and cannot be dissolved into language, because it always precedes the emergence of language, form, and conceptuality. The classical law of the excluded third, tertium non datur, operates within a language of fixed determinations. Something either is or is not. But the living process is not either one or the other, it is the excluded third itself. The paradox is profound. The linguistic expression the excluded third is itself subject to the law of the excluded third, as it is a symbol, but that to which it refers escapes this law. Cannot be logically represented, only lived, only grasped through enactment. If the validity of the logical law is uncritically transferred onto life itself, onto consciousness, movement, becoming, then a systematic misunderstanding arises, logical paradoxes. These are not weaknesses of language, but symptoms of a fundamental error, the error of believing that the living must conform to the structure of the concept. A philosophy that regards process as primary does not begin with a definition or a concept, but with the open space before determination. There, where the third has not yet been excluded. There, where the question does not converge on an alternative, but opens a movement. The living process, the temporalizing, is not an object of logic, but its enabling ground. It is the soil in which language grows, not the product of linguistic operations. And this means, not everything can be said. Not everything can be decided. Not everything can be fully cast into symbols. But this is not a deficiency. It is the condition for the emergence of the new.